Hey guys, welcome back to another Simon Says DIY video. I've got a project for you today that I'm super excited about. I've been wanting to do it for months, and if you've watched some of my other videos, you may have heard me mention that I want to make one of these, and this is a lathe. Now, this is a project that I made several months ago. I really want to just test it out, see if I liked doing it, and if so, I might build a bigger one. Well, I absolutely loved it, was able to make a bunch of different things, tool handles to tops or toys for kids, as well as Christmas ornaments, candlesticks, that sort of thing. So I really want to make a bigger one of these. I had a few limitations to this one. The power, for one, I have two motors attached to this, and they're just small blower motors, and it still did not have enough power. I had to make special chisels for this, that the tips were so fine on it that it would only shave off a little amount of wood each time, or else it would completely stop the motors. So that's one thing I really want to upgrade. Also, the diameter of wood. You can see here it's only about 7 to 8 inches in diameter that I could do, but even then the motors were too weak to spin something like that, so I never really got up to that large to reach the full capacity, and the length I never really used as well because it only got up to about 1.5 feet and it started wobbling around a lot and wasn't really stable. So I've got a lot of improvements I want to do, as well as a fully functional tool rest. This one is pretty simple, but I want to make one more complex and really something that will outlast the uses that I need it for and be able to do any projects that I need. So this is what I made, and I really want to upgrade this, so I'll draw up some plans and show you what I've got. I'm going to start by sketching out my plans for this, and these are going to be pretty rough plans, which means I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work out, so I'll be modifying the plan as I go along if I run into any problems, but this gives me something to work off of and get started. Here's the finished plans for the lathe. I'm going to be making it 4 feet long. This will help save in materials because I'm using plywood and the sheets are already 4 feet long. I'll make the track for the lathe 4 inches high, and then on top of that, the headstock will be 11 inches. So that'll give me roughly about 8 inches in height on the shaft. That will give me 16 inches overall in width of wood that I could spin. In the next video, I'll draw up some plans for the tailstock as well as the tool rest, but for this one, I'm focusing on just the lathe body, and this housing right here, the headstock, I'm going to be putting in some wooden pulleys. I'll carve those by hand after I mount them on a threaded rod, which will act as the shaft for the lathe. Now here is a side view of the tracks that I'm using for the lathe, and this will be 9 inches wide. And I really want to make this rugged. I'll be using 3 sheets of plywood laminated together for the side beams, and then a sheet of plywood on the top for the rails. And this will allow the tailstock to slide up and down freely and have something to clamp onto. I'll start today by creating the base for the lathe as well as the track for the tailstock to slide on and to mount the motor. So I'll be ripping down this plywood into the sizes that I need, and then I'll be laminating them together to increase the strength of the plywood. Now that the glue has dried, I'm going to send this through my joiner just to even up the edges and make sure everything's square. Now that I have the beams ready, I'm going to attach the rails on top, and this is what helps the tailstock stay centered as it slides up and down, and also gives something for the tailstock to clamp down onto to hold it in place. Now I'm going to attach the two rails to the base and make sure that they are the same distance apart, because the track that's going to slide in between, it needs to be exactly the same distance all the way down so it doesn't get stuck anywhere. I have a little bit of excess material on the side of this, so I'm just going to send it through the table saw to flush up the base. Now that I have finished the base and the tracks, I'm going to build the housing for the pulleys and the headstock to mount to. I'll be laminating 2 sheets of plywood for the faceplate and the back, just to give it a little more strength for the bearings to mount to and hold the shaft steady. Now that the glue is dry, I need to trim down these pieces so they're both the same size and flush up all the edges. Alright, now I need to drill the holes for the bearings to set down into, and right now I don't have any Forstner drill bits, so I can't do this on the drill press, and all I have that will do the job is this ancient drill bit, so it's the best I can do right now, but it's a lot harder than it should be to drill this hole straight. Alright, I'm going to use these circles that I've cut out previously on another project, but you can click that link right up in the right corner to see my circle jig that I used to do this. These worked out really well. I saved them because I thought I could use it for something, and I'll use these for the pulleys that the belt will attach to, and I'll trim it down to size after I hook it up to the motor. Alright, I've cut out another base. This will allow me to mount the lathe and the motor together and eventually build a stand for the lathe to stand on. I'll have the motor attached to a piece of wood and then mounted onto a hinge so that the weight of the motor will actually act as the tensioner for the belt. And I may need to modify this later if there's too much wobble in it, but it seems like it should work fairly well. Next, I'll be attaching this threaded rod using some bolts and washers and mounting the pulleys as well. Now that everything is tight and ready to go, I'm going to turn on the motor and start carving the pulleys to the correct diameter that I want, and also cut a groove perfectly sized for the belt to fit down into. Now I don't need this threaded rod as long as it is, so I'll cut this off to the right size, and I'll use the piece for the tailstop later on. But I'll take my grinder, turn on the lathe, and just sharpen this tip to a nice sharp point, and that'll act as a good centering mark for the wood to mount to. I'm going to finish off this headstock by sealing it all up. This will help cut down on some of the noise and vibration from the belts and pulleys, but if anything does manage to fly off, it is all contained and perfectly safe. Next, I'll screw on this drive nut onto the threaded rod. I'll cut some teeth onto this, and this will help grip the wood as it's spinning and hold on to it. But I'm having a hard time screwing this onto the thread, so I add some oil to the threads, and eventually I get it to thread on smoothly. After using the angle grinder to cut out the rough shape of the teeth, I'm going to use a hand file and just sharpen them a bit and get a little more detailed. Here's the finished bit from my lathe, and you can see the teeth there. As I clamp down the piece of wood, the teeth will sink in and hold the wood tightly and keep it spinning. Here's the finished lathe. I've got to build a tailstock for it. I have the track ready so the tailstock will be able to slide down through there, lock in place, and I also have to build a tool rest. But you can see here the motor, I have it mounted. It's on a set of hinges, so the weight of the motor actually tensions the belt on its own, and it's really easy to change pulleys from the faster speed to slow speed. I may need to add a few more pulleys later on, but we'll see after it's finished. I'll test it out, and if it needs adjusting, I will at the end. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's more technical and a little bit more complicated than my normal builds, but I'm hoping that this turns out really well. I'm excited. And if you guys want to see the outcome of this project, check out my part 2 video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.